The suitcase had been hidden behind a wall for 32 years. Its leather was cracked, its handle wrapped in tarnished copper wire, and a faded railway tag carried the name of a woman no one in Bellwether wanted to discuss. When Evelyn Carter reached toward it, a voice behind her said, "You should put that back." But 3 weeks earlier, Evelyn had never heard of Bellwether, its abandoned station, or the woman whose secrets had been sealed inside it. At 54, Evelyn believed the hardest years of her life were already behind her. She was wrong. After nearly 3 decades of marriage, she walked out of the courthouse with one suitcase, an aging car, and less than $2,000 in her bank account. The house was gone. Most of the savings had disappeared into legal fees and debts she had not known existed. The antique shop she had once dreamed of opening was now impossible. Her 2 children lived in other states, each carrying struggles of their own, and Evelyn could not bring herself to tell them she had nowhere permanent to sleep. For several weeks, she stayed on a friend's sofa. During the day, she applied for jobs. At night, she stared at the ceiling and wondered how 30 years of effort could vanish in a few months. People advised her to be practical, find a cheap apartment, accept any job. Stop imagining that life could begin again at her age. Evelyn listened politely. Then one cold morning, she packed everything she owned into her car and drove away. She had no plan beyond getting far enough from the city to breathe. The road carried her through empty farmland and small towns where boarded storefronts faced silent streets. By late afternoon, rain hammered the windshield, and her car began making a sharp metallic noise. She pulled into Bellwether. The town seemed nearly asleep. A diner, a hardware store, and a bank stood along the main street, surrounded by dark windows and faded signs. Evelyn parked beneath an old public notice board and waited for the rain to ease. That was when she saw the paper. It was damp, curling at the corners and almost hidden beneath advertisements for firewood and used farm equipment. Historic train station for sale, $1. Evelyn read it twice, then a third time. She did not know why anyone would sell a building for $1. She did not know that the station was collapsing, and she certainly did not know that something had been waiting inside it for more than 3 decades. But for the first time since the divorce, Evelyn felt something stronger than fear. Curiosity. She tore the phone number from the bottom of the notice and slipped it into her pocket. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside Evelyn, something had finally begun to move. The next morning, Evelyn called the number from the diner. A woman at the municipal office answered. "I'm calling about the train station," Evelyn said. "The $1 property?" "Yes." A pause followed. Most people change their minds after they see it. An hour later, Evelyn sat across from Mayor Thomas Reed in a small office above the town library. He placed a thin folder on the desk. The station had been abandoned for 32 years. Its roof leaked, the wiring was unsafe, and part of the platform had begun to collapse. Several buyers had shown interest, but none had signed after seeing the estimated repair costs. "The dollar is symbolic," Reed said. "The real price is keeping the building alive." Evelyn looked through the photographs. Broken windows, rotten boards, weeds growing through the tracks. Yet beneath the damage, she saw red brick walls, high ceilings, and an old ticket office large enough to become a temporary room. "What happens if someone buys it?" she asked. "They have 1 year to stabilize the structure and preserve the historic exterior. The town inspects it every 3 months. Fail the agreement, and the property returns to us." "And there's no funding?" "None." Evelyn thought of the money in her bank account. Less than $2,000. It was not enough to restore a station. It was barely enough to survive. Still, she asked to see it. That afternoon, Mayor Reed drove her beyond the last row of houses. The station appeared behind a rusted railway sign, half hidden by trees and grass. The photographs had been generous. Several roof tiles were missing. One window was boarded shut. Another hung crooked from its frame. The platform sagged near the eastern end, and vines had climbed across the faded station sign. "This is where most people leave," Reed said. Evelyn stepped out of the car. Rainwater dripped from the roof. Wind moved through the weeds along the tracks. Somewhere inside, something struck metal with a faint, hollow sound. She looked toward the dark windows. For a moment, she imagined how foolish she must appear. 54 years old, almost broke, standing in front of a building everyone else had rejected. Then she remembered the courthouse, the sofa, the voices telling her to accept that her best years were over. Evelyn walked to the entrance and placed her hand against the cold brick. The station was damaged. So was she. But damaged did not mean finished. "I'll take it," she said. Mayor Reed stared at her. "You haven't even been inside." "I know. You could lose everything you have left." Evelyn looked up at the faded letters above the door. "Bellwether. I already lost the life I thought I had," she replied. "I'm not losing the chance to build another one." The mayor studied her for a long moment. Then he opened the folder and handed her a pen. As Evelyn signed, neither of them noticed the luggage room window at the far end of the station. Behind its dust-covered glass, something moved briefly in the darkness. 3 days later, Evelyn received the keys to Bellwether Station. They were dark with rust and tied together by a strip of faded red cloth. Mayor Reed placed them in her palm after she signed the final document. "The station is yours now," he said, including everything wrong with it. By noon, Evelyn stood outside the entrance with a flashlight, a broom, a toolbox, and everything she owned packed inside her car. The front door refused to move. She pushed with her shoulder until the swollen frame gave way with a sharp crack. Cold, damp air rolled from the darkness. The photographs had not captured the smell. Wet wood, mold, dust, something faintly metallic. Broken glass covered the waiting room floor. Old railway schedules hung crooked on the walls, their dates nearly erased. A row of wooden benches leaned against one another beneath the cracked windows. Evelyn stepped inside. Her footsteps echoed through the station. The ticket office stood behind a metal grill. It was narrow but dry enough for a folding mattress and a camping stove. In one corner, water dripped into a dented bucket. She chose that room as her temporary home. For the next several hours, Evelyn swept away dust, carried out broken boards, and opened every window that had not been nailed shut. Beneath the dirt, patterned floor tiles slowly appeared. The station did not feel lifeless. A child's marble rested beneath a bench. An old luggage tag lay beside the platform door. Someone had carved initials into the ticket counter. People had once waited here for beginnings and goodbyes. Now Evelyn was the only one left. Near sunset, a truck slowed outside. 2 men looked through the windows. One laughed. "Give her a week." Evelyn kept sweeping until the truck disappeared. That night, rain struck the roof. Water began leaking in 3 places, and a section of plaster crashed onto the waiting room floor. For a moment, Evelyn stood motionless. She had spent almost $400 on basic tools, food, and emergency materials. She could not afford a contractor. She barely knew how to repair a wall. Leaving would have been reasonable. Instead, she covered the damaged area with plastic, placed buckets beneath the leaks, and returned to work. Just before midnight, while heating soup in the ticket office, Evelyn heard a sound from the far end of the building. A quiet metallic tap, then silence. A few seconds later, it came again. Tap. Evelyn lifted her flashlight and followed the sound down the hallway. It led to a heavy wooden door marked luggage room. She tried the handle. Locked. As Evelyn leaned closer, something moved behind the door. Not footsteps, something lighter. A scrape followed by another faint tap. Evelyn stepped back. She could have searched for the key. Instead, she returned to the ticket office and placed a chair beneath the door handle. The luggage room had been sealed for decades. It could remain sealed for one more night. But as Evelyn lay awake beneath the leaking roof, she could not stop thinking about what might be waiting inside. By the end of her first week, Evelyn had cleared most of the waiting room and made the old ticket office barely livable. The luggage room was different. It stood at the far end of the station behind a heavy wooden door. Inside, broken trunks, rusted carts, and collapsed shelves filled nearly every corner. The air smelled of wet wood and old paper. Evelyn avoided it until a cold afternoon when rain made outdoor repairs impossible. She began dragging the damaged furniture into the hallway. Beneath one shelf, she found faded baggage labels from cities the trains no longer visited. Under another, she discovered a child's red mitten stiff with dust. Near the back wall stood a tall storage rack. It looked ordinary, except for one thing. Whenever the wind struck the station, the rack trembled and made a faint metallic tapping sound. At first, Evelyn assumed a loose pipe was hidden behind it, but when she pressed her ear against the wall, she heard the sound again. Tap. Pause. Tap. She pulled at the rack, but it would not move. Its legs had been nailed directly into the floor. Using a hammer and crowbar, Evelyn worked each nail loose. The final one snapped free. The rack tilted forward, revealing a narrow outline in the wall behind it. Evelyn wiped away the dust. It was not part of the brickwork. It was a door. Someone had covered it with thin wooden panels, painted them to match the wall, and placed the storage rack in front of it. There was no handle, only a small metal keyhole darkened with age. Evelyn tried both station keys. Neither fit. For several minutes, she stood staring at the hidden door. Every sensible thought told her to leave it alone until she could ask the town about it. Instead, she searched the room. Inside the drawer of an overturned desk, beneath old receipts and mouse-chewed envelopes, she found a small brass key tied to a piece of string. Her hands shook as she placed it in the lock. The key turned. The hidden door opened inward with a long, strained groan. Beyond it was a narrow room without windows. Dust floated through the beam of her flashlight. Shelves lined one wall, but they were empty. At the center of the floor sat a single leather suitcase. It was dark brown, cracked along the edges and wrapped with tarnished copper wire. A faded railway tag hung from its handle. Evelyn crouched beside it. Someone had written a name across the tag in careful black letters. Clara Whitmore. Before Evelyn could touch the suitcase, a voice came from the luggage room doorway. "You shouldn't have opened that." Evelyn turned sharply. An elderly man stood in the hall, his wet coat dripping onto the tiles. His face had gone pale as he stared past her at the forgotten suitcase. The elderly man remained in the doorway. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn stood and lowered the flashlight. "Who is Clara Whitmore?" she asked. The man looked at the suitcase as if it had been waiting for him. "My name is Walter Hale," he said. "My father worked at this station when I was a boy." He stepped slowly into the luggage room, careful not to cross the hidden doorway. Clara worked here too. She sold tickets, handled parcels, helped passengers who couldn't read the schedules. People trusted her. Then why was her suitcase sealed inside a wall? Walter's expression tightened. Because after she disappeared, the town decided it was easier not to ask questions. He explained that Clara had arrived in Bellwether during the final years of passenger service. She was quiet, unmarried, and known for helping families who had fallen on hard times. During harsh winters, sacks of flour and vegetables sometimes appeared outside their doors. No one ever proved Clara was responsible, but most people believed it. Then, one autumn evening, she failed to return home. Her coat was found inside the station. Her bicycle was still chained near the platform. There was no note, no witness, and no sign that she had boarded a train. Some believed she had run away. Others whispered that she had discovered something the railway company wanted hidden. "The sheriff searched the station," Walter said, "but not this room. No one knew it existed." Evelyn looked down at the copper wire wrapped around the suitcase. "Did they ever find her?" Walter shook his head. After a while, people stopped saying her name. He moved closer and studied the luggage tag. "My father mentioned a suitcase once. He said Clara kept important papers in it. After she vanished, he warned me never to go looking." "Why?" Walter's voice dropped. "He said some truths don't disappear. They only wait for someone desperate enough to uncover them." A cold draft moved through the hidden room. Evelyn touched the damaged leather handle. "I think that someone already tried to keep this buried." Walter nodded toward the wire. "And they may have had a reason." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "If you open it, don't assume everything inside belongs to the past." After Walter left, Evelyn carried the suitcase into the ticket office and placed it on the desk. For nearly an hour, she simply stared at it. Then she found a pair of wire cutters. The first strand snapped easily. The second did not. By the time the final coil fell away, night had settled over the station. Evelyn lifted the two brass latches. One opened, the other clicked and remained locked. Then, from somewhere beneath the platform, she heard 3 slow knocks. Not from the wind, not from the pipes. 3 deliberate knocks. Evelyn froze beside the desk. The 3 knocks did not come again. For several minutes, she listened to the darkness beneath the platform. Then she took the flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The station was silent except for rain dripping through the roof. She checked the platform door. Still locked. The windows were empty. When she returned to the ticket office, the suitcase remained exactly where she had left it. Evelyn forced the second latch open with a screwdriver. The lid rose slowly. There was no money inside. No jewelry. No hidden fortune. Instead, she found bundles of letters tied with blue ribbon, faded photographs, old train tickets, and a small leather journal. Beneath them lay several paper packets labeled in careful handwriting. Beans, corn, tomatoes, squash. Seeds. Evelyn lifted one packet gently. The paper was yellow with age, but the seal had never been broken. At the bottom of the suitcase was an envelope addressed to no one. On the front, Clara had written, "For the person who refuses to let this place die." Evelyn opened it. The letter explained that the land behind the station had once been more than an empty field. During years of layoffs and failed harvests, Clara and several railway workers had grown food there for families who could not afford it. The garden had been hidden from company officials because the railway claimed every piece of land beside the tracks. When management discovered it, they ordered the crops destroyed and threatened anyone who continued helping Clara. But Clara had saved the seeds. She had also recorded everything in the journal: planting dates, names of families, sketches of irrigation channels, and notes about a spring beneath the eastern edge of the property. One final sentence had been underlined twice. "The garden can return, but only if someone remembers where the water runs." Evelyn looked through the rain-streaked window toward the overgrown field. For the first time, she noticed that one narrow strip of grass remained greener than everything around it. Then she heard another sound. Not a knock this time. A slow scrape came from beneath the platform. Evelyn closed the suitcase and grabbed the flashlight. Following the sound, she stepped outside and crouched beside the cracked foundation. Behind a curtain of weeds, she found a small iron access door almost completely buried in mud. 3 fresh marks had been scratched across its surface. Someone, or something, had been on the other side. Evelyn knelt beside the iron door and brushed away the mud with both hands. The scraping stopped. For a moment, she considered calling Walter or the sheriff. Instead, she wedged the screwdriver beneath the rusted latch and pulled. The door opened with a groan. A warm, damp smell drifted out. Behind it was not a person, but a narrow drainage tunnel beneath the platform. Water moved slowly through the darkness, carrying leaves and pieces of rotted wood. Then something darted past her flashlight. A raccoon. It scrambled deeper into the tunnel and disappeared. Evelyn let out the breath she had been holding. The mysterious knocks had likely been the animal striking the metal door while searching for shelter. But the tunnel itself mattered far more. According to Clara's journal, the old garden had been watered by a shallow spring connected to a stone channel beneath the station. If this drainage passage was part of that system, the water might still be flowing. The next morning, Evelyn followed the strip of unusually green grass behind the platform. It curved through weeds and ended near a shallow depression filled with reeds. She pushed a shovel into the soil. Only a few inches down, the ground was dark and damp. Evelyn opened Clara's journal again. One page showed the station, the platform, and 6 long garden beds. Beside them was a handwritten note. "The railway called this land useless because it flooded in spring. We used the water instead of fighting it. The garden had not failed because the soil was poor. It had been destroyed because it existed without permission." Evelyn spent the next several days clearing brush from the old channel. Beneath layers of roots and silt, She uncovered flat stones arranged in a deliberate line. Near the eastern edge of the property, water began to seep between them. Not much, but enough to prove Clara had told the truth. Walter returned that afternoon. When he saw the exposed channel, he stood silently for a long time. "I remember vegetables growing here," he finally said. "My mother brought me after dark. Clara gave us potatoes and beans." "Why didn't anyone protect the garden?" Evelyn asked. Walter lowered his eyes. "People were afraid of losing their jobs. Then the railway left, and everyone acted as though none of it had happened." He pointed toward an old cottonwood tree near the tracks. The garden started there, 6 rows, maybe 7. Together, they walked across the overgrown ground. For Evelyn, the field was no longer empty. She could see the outlines of what had once existed, and what might exist again. That evening, she placed Clara's seed packets across the ticket office desk. They were old, some might never grow, but Evelyn understood the message inside the suitcase now. Clara had not hidden a fortune. She had hidden a beginning. The following morning, Evelyn counted the money she had left. $943. It had to cover food, fuel, repairs to the station, and whatever the garden needed. Using any of it on seeds that might already be dead was unreasonable. But Clara's letter had not been written for someone seeking a safe choice. Evelyn began with the land. She repaired the old stone channel, dug shallow trenches, and marked 6 garden beds according to the journal's faded sketch. Walter brought a shovel and a wheelbarrow. A local hardware store owner quietly donated damaged lumber that could no longer be sold. Most people, however, remained doubtful. "You can't feed yourself with history," one man told her. Evelyn did not argue. She spent nearly half her remaining money on compost, fencing, and tools. Before planting Clara's seeds, she tested a few from each packet between damp pieces of cloth. For days, nothing happened. Then one bean seed cracked open. A tiny white root emerged. Evelyn stared at it as though it were gold. She planted the strongest seeds in small containers inside the station, where she could protect them from the cold. Each morning, she checked the soil before doing anything else. A few shoots appeared. Most did not. Still, Evelyn transferred the surviving seedlings into the garden. She built barriers against animals and carried buckets of water from the restored channel whenever the flow weakened. For a brief time, the field began to change. Thin rows of green stretched beside the abandoned tracks. People slowed their cars to look. Even Mayor Reed admitted the property no longer seemed entirely hopeless. Then the weather turned. 3 days of heavy rain flooded the eastern beds. Water rushed through the old channel faster than Evelyn had expected, tearing through the loose soil and carrying several seedlings away. She worked in the storm, stacking boards and sandbags with numb hands. By morning, half the garden was gone. The station roof had also worsened. Water had damaged the ticket office wall, and an inspector was scheduled to return within 2 weeks. Evelyn had only $86 left. Standing in the mud, she looked at the broken beds and crushed plants. For the first time since buying the station, she wondered whether everyone had been right. Perhaps a ruined building could not become a home. Perhaps old seeds could not restore a forgotten garden. Perhaps beginning again at 54 had been nothing more than a desperate fantasy. Evelyn returned to the station and began packing her suitcase. Then Walter shouted from outside. She found him kneeling beside the last garden bed. Beneath a layer of storm-washed soil, a row of small green leaves was pushing toward the light. The seeds had survived, but Evelyn no longer had enough money to save them. Walter looked at the surviving seedlings, then at Evelyn's packed suitcase inside the station. "You're not leaving," he said. "I have $86, Evelyn replied. "The roof is failing, the inspection is coming, and half the garden is gone." Walter stood slowly. "Then the town needs to decide whether it wants to lose this place twice." That afternoon, he walked through Bellwether carrying Clara's journal under his arm. He stopped at the diner, the hardware store, the library, and the small church near Main Street. He told people about the hidden garden, the families it had fed, and the woman whose name the town had allowed to disappear. By evening, 6 volunteers arrived at the station. The next morning there were 15. The hardware store owner brought roofing sheets. A retired carpenter repaired the damaged ticket office wall. 2 teenagers cleared weeds from the platform, while several women rebuilt the washed-out garden beds with stones and timber. Mayor Reed arrived carrying official documents. "The town can't give you money," he said, "but we can delay the inspection and provide a waste container." For the first time, Evelyn was not rebuilding alone. News of the suitcase spread beyond Bellwether. A local reporter photographed Clara's letters, the old seed packets, and the green shoots rising beside the abandoned tracks. Within days, people began arriving from neighboring towns. Some came to volunteer. Others brought tools, food, and small donations. A university archivist examined the journal and confirmed that the railway dates, maps, and names matched historical records. A horticulturist studied the surviving plants and explained that they were likely descendants of old regional varieties, preserved because Clara had stored them in cool, dry conditions. Evelyn refused to sell the suitcase or divide its contents. Instead, she placed the letters, photographs, and journal behind glass in the restored ticket office. Above them, she hung a simple sign, "Clara Whitmore Community Garden." By late summer, beans climbed handmade trellises. Squash spread across the eastern beds, and tomatoes ripened beside the platform where passengers had once waited for trains. The waiting room became a weekend market. Local farmers sold bread, honey, vegetables, and handmade goods beneath the restored schedule board. Every Saturday, the station filled with voices again. One evening, Evelyn stood outside as children ran between the garden beds and musicians played beneath the platform roof. Walter joined her. "Clara would have liked this," he said. Evelyn looked at the station glowing in the sunset. "She didn't save this place for herself," Evelyn replied. "She saved it for whoever came next." For the first time in decades, Bellwether Station was no longer a monument to what the town had lost. It had become proof of what people could recover when they finally chose to remember. 1 year after Evelyn signed the papers, Mayor Reed returned to Bellwether Station for the final inspection. This time, he did not bring a list of warnings. He stood beneath the repaired roof and watched sunlight fall across the restored floor tiles. The waiting room smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Outside, volunteers harvested beans while children painted signs for the weekend market. The station had passed every requirement. Evelyn officially owned it. But the building was no longer hers alone. A portion of the garden supplied fresh produce to elderly residents and families struggling with food costs. The market helped local farmers earn extra income. The old ticket office became a small cafe and historical exhibit, with Clara's suitcase displayed behind glass. Evelyn never became rich. She still repaired things herself, worried about bills, and worked longer days than she had imagined possible. Yet each morning, she woke beneath the station roof, knowing that her work mattered to someone. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Evelyn's daughter. She had seen an article about the station online. "I thought you had disappeared because you were ashamed," the letter read. "Now I understand that you were trying to find yourself again." Her children visited the following month. They walked through the garden, read Clara's letters, and listened as Evelyn told them how close she had come to leaving. For the first time since the divorce, she did not feel like a woman explaining her failure. She felt like someone sharing what she had built. That evening, Evelyn carried the original $1 sales notice to the platform. She framed it and hung it beside the entrance. A visitor stopped to read it. "Was the station really only $1?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. The building was. She looked toward the repaired roof, the crowded market, and the rows of vegetables glowing beneath the setting sun. "The rest cost everything I had." Before closing, Evelyn entered the ticket office and opened Clara's journal to its final page. Beneath the old writing, she added one sentence of her own. "A place is never truly abandoned while someone is willing to care for it." Then she closed the book and placed it beside the forgotten suitcase. At 54, Evelyn had arrived in Bellwether believing she had lost her home, her future, and the best years of her life. The suitcase did not give her money. It gave her a story worth continuing, a community that needed her, and the courage to believe that an ending could become a beginning. The abandoned station had once been the place where journeys ended. For Evelyn, it became the place where life finally began again.